Hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and cease the music and do my little intro bit. My name is Daniel Holter. I'm a little bit sickly, so you get to see me today unshaven and on cough medicine. So we'll see how that goes. I'm excited about this event today. Toga reached out to me, I want to say like December, maybe even November of last year, and said he was trying to gather research on who was doing education for airmen and guardians in the design thinking and problem solving military design space. And that's very much up my alley with regards to what we do at Agitare. So this is an Agitare event. I'm just getting you familiar with that. You are in the correct place. This is an Agitare event, and we're looking at what is the state of design education for airmen and guardians for the entire Department of the Air Force. And before we get into intro with Toga and me, we're going to send you all to breakouts for an activity. And this activity is going to be, I think, about 5 breakouts. And we're just going to ask you, introduce yourself really quick to the team that you're on. You will be labeled breakout 1, breakout 2, right? So please be aware of which room you're in. And we want you to come up with the design criteria for what does the world's best design program look like for airmen and guardians? What would your design criteria be in the ideal world in which there were no constraints and you got everything on your wish list? So you're going to do that in breakouts, and we're going to see you back here in about 10 minutes to share with us what you came up with. 10 minutes. Any questions before I send you? Wonderful. We will see you back here in 10. All right. It looks like everybody is back. We now have 42 participants. What an excellent showing. All right. I would like to hear, and you only have 1 minute per group, which is not very much time. Okay. I would like to hear from group number 1, your design criteria.
We came up with a whole bunch of keywords, including wargaming, experiential, uninhibited communication, dealing with complexity in a complex, compliant environment, essential and non-essential, mission critical terms, inclusion and inclusive, conjunctive, which requires everyone to join in and play in order for all to succeed, and creating a diverse community. Oh.
Wow, fantastic. And let's hear from group 2. What did you come up with for the design criteria for the ideal design education for airmen and guardians?
We came up with KISS cross. So keep it simple and short. Use people's strengths. And for the cross, constraints and cross-functional are really important to us, as well as real-world problems, core skill development at basic training or something like that, and a team-based model. So KISS with 3 S's and cross.
Wow, that's like once you have an acronym for your framework, that's all you really need to write a book, I think.
Pretty much done. Yeah, we're ready to be hired.
Yeah. Okay. Can I hear from room number 3? What did you come up with for your design criteria?
All right. We got really many votes on democratization. So democratizing, so actually causing democratization. Got votes for experimentation, open experimentation, people being included in the design process, not just using it, but in terms of the design process itself. And vote for well-being. And what am I missing, Jesse? JJ?
It was democratization, time management, experimentation, well-being, and ownership, I believe, was the last one, but we had gotten cut off.
Yeah, it was ownership. Got it right in the last second.
Love it. Yeah. All right. Can we hear now from room number 4?
So we came up with experience-based, away from work, connected with a cohort of a diverse background. It has to be fun. Ideally, it'd be provided in tiers with maybe a key fundamentals for everyone that's done asynchronously, and then some sort of component of gamification. Did I miss anything, team?
We need a cool acronym. TIE Fighter. That's what we call it.
TIE Fighter. I think it's interesting you went immediately to a Star Wars reference. All right, that's fantastic. I love it. Okay, room number 5.
Would be me. You know, I feel like everything that came up in our group has been named already, and except for, I'm just not sure if ongoing was one. We iterative and ongoing, so it's really, there's a lot of space based in between. And people already talked about real world challenges, more experiential than informational, team-based, learner directed for sure.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I love all those criteria. And in part, the reason we started with an activity, I will tell you, is because these days I start almost every event with an activity to make sure to give all the participants of what we're about to do a voice before they have to go into a long period of listening to other people who have a voice. So the pattern of this event goes, let you all have a voice in what you think the ideal design outcome should be for airmen and guardians. And then, not outcome, experience rather. And then we're going to have a showcase, which is what we're going to do after Toga and I do a quick introduction, in which a bunch of providers of design education kind of share out the way that they're doing it and for whom they are doing it and what their measures of success are and other criteria. So it's going to be a bit of just kind of a broadcast mode at that point, where we will all be the audience to hear this variety of different modes of education that are being offered to airmen and guardians. After that showcase portion, we're going to have a group discussion period, which hopefully it'll last at least 30 minutes, depending on how long the showcase goes. And then we're going to have a soft ending. And then after that, there will be a period where you can stick around and continue to chat if you would like. But we do want to give people voice at the beginning and voice at the end, where we're going to reflect on what we heard from all of the presenters about what is there and what's missing and who's being served really well right now. And is everybody kind of going about it the exact same way? Do we need more diversity in the offerings of these education offerings? My brain is not the best right now. I'm a little bit sick, so please bear with me. So I'm Daniel Holter. I'll talk a little bit about Agitare during the showcase. So I won't do that now, except to say that this is kind of an Agitare hosted event, but it was launched primarily by Toga. I don't know if spotlighting me is, maybe I should spotlight myself. I wasn't showing up. Toga reached out to me and said that he's doing a research project to find out who all is offering design education and what all those flavors are and the modalities and how people are trained to be trainers and, other such important questions about how we're serving design competency across the Air Force. And inevitably, this question of, well, what should we contain the term design under? Like what should be inside that versus what falls out of it? For example, is something that's purely dedicated to problem solving or innovation, is that design? Or is design just like the UX thing or architecture? Like that's where you're like actually sketching products on a board. Is that design? I tend to opt for more generous and inclusive things because I don't ever want to be a gatekeeper. So I have asked those who are presenting today to share, in addition to what they're doing, what does design mean to them? And why is what you're teaching, why should that be called design? And why is it important for us to have as a competency among airmen and guardians. So that's kind of it for me and my intro. I would like to throw to Toga before we move on to the open mic portion of this.
Thanks, Daniel. And I'll share a single slide here in a moment if you give me those. There we go. I love the fact that you use the analogy to flavors because that's my opening metaphor. Anyone here familiar with a Beta beer? Anyone had a Beta beer before? It's a microbrewery. Beta Springs is a wonderful little town just north of New Orleans, and just next to Beta is a little town called Covington. And Covington's sort of a eclectic place, lots of art, lots of live music, and it's Louisiana, right? So we have lots of great food. And every year there's a charity event called the Chef Soiree, and local chefs prepare, like small little samples of their favorite dishes. And so if you can imagine this, it's at the park. It's a wonderful park. There's lots of people are nice eating, they're visiting. So three things are really happening, right? Chefs are getting ideas from each other, which is cool. People are connecting with new friends or reconnecting with old friends. And people who are kind of scoping out the scene, maybe they're writing blogs on food reviews, maybe they're writing travel guides, they're kind of scoping out the scene and getting the latest, right? Essentially, that's what I hope happens tonight, right? That we're here to share ideas, we're here to share time with old friends, maybe make some new connections, and ultimately produce something useful for the community. And so with that, Daniel, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, thank you, Toga. Also, if you say anything in chat, please don't hesitate to also tell me in person, because I struggle to pay attention to chat while I'm doing virtual events. So the way this is going to work is these presenters are going to do basically pitches of 3 to 4 minutes. They're going to share their program. We've offered them a few probes in advance that we want them to cover. Who is this program for? What kinds of things does it teach? For example, what you say it teaches design, but what do you mean when you say that it teaches design? How's it offered? And then some status and successes and throughput and failures, if you have time for it. And we would also like you all, the listeners and audience, to participate in Zoom chat as you're hearing this. If you have thoughts or questions that are occurring to you as you're listening to these speakers, and they might be tangential thoughts on the subject of design and design education, please put those in the Zoom chat. We are going to be using that material to analyze kind of how people are thinking about design education across the Air Force and Space Force. So it is useful for us to gather those artifacts. And they also, if you have questions for the speakers and they end early, we can gather those questions from the chat and offer them up to the speakers so they can use their remaining time in that way. So please use Zoom chat if you have any questions. And then in the group portion, if you have anything you want to talk to, then there's going to be a period where you're welcome to, come off mute and speak up about everything that you heard, the overlap, some of the gaps that might exist. All right. I think that is about it for the intro portion. And our first speaker is going to be Sarah Bakhtiari, who will be talking about Project Everest. And I'm going to share my sound, unless you have slides. Sarah, do you have slides?
I do have slides.
Oh, then I'm not going to share my sound. I'm just going to speak up when you have 1 minute left.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to start my timer too. You've asked us to talk about a lot of things in 4 minutes. So I'm going to do my best to zoom through some of the basics of Project Everest, and then hope to engage with any or all of you at some future point around our effort here. So Project Everest is what we call a military strategy design and facilitation startup. It's a within government organization that gets funding from random people in random places and sometimes our own pocketbooks. But it's something that a group of us started about 8 years ago to deal with what we thought was a very serious problem across our joint force. And that problem is that the joint force does not understand our adversaries very well. And that strategy development methods, if you could even call them that, within the Department of Defense are very stale. Even talking to some of my friends in very high places for this last round of the NDS that's being drafted now, sitting around the conference room table with 22 people offering their inputs is probably not the optimal way to start a strategy design kickoff. So we saw this problem and wondered what we could do about it, and thought we need to immerse members now in adversary thinking, not wait until they get to some staff or AOR or plan shop somewhere, and that's the first time they start studying China or Russia or some of our big strategic competitors. And then we need to unlock the insights that they generate through this education for strategy design, for the purposes of defense strategy. So we do that through a combination of education and design practice. Education part is a little bit obvious, I feel like. So we give a lot of classified briefings on the adversaries' ways of war, their strategy, how they approach problems, and this kind of thing. The design piece might be a little bit more surprising. So the next couple of slides speak to the why design thinking part. Much of the bureaucracy that we are a part of, or at least that I am a part of in the Department of Defense, is focused on exploitation type of innovation, right? Incremental advances. And we really want those hitting it out of the park kind of ideas at Project Everest to get them incorporated into our strategies. So we operate in that tiny little wedge of explore. And we know that you need a lot of ideas to get just a few good ideas, right? You might notice these or recognize these slides from Stanford D School. And the D School approach is what we use in our week-long classified workshops in order to help generate ideas, novel ideas for strategy development. So we use that empathize phase through the classified education and really try to cultivate a deep understanding in the participants through subject matter expertise, briefing, and engagement. And then we usually define a problem for them. So the Project Everest team will come up with a problem. You see the problem statement here from our last workshop, or sometimes we'll have a sponsor office that offers us a problem. And then we really spend a lot of time in the ideation phase because we want to take these insights that are very from our novice participants, right? From people who are unfamiliar with the subject area, and see what stands out to them and try to grab those things and then develop them into some kind of operational concept or strategy prototype. And then ultimately we sort of aggregate all that information and produce a classified report, which sounds really underwhelming. It does go to some senior levels in the DoD, and so has had an impact. But we are hoping that down the road we could have those inputs get into some wargaming or simulations and see how they actually fare. So that's really the gist of Project Everest. This is where you can find us. We have a website, we're on LinkedIn, and very easy emails if there's any collaboration or a conversation you want to have with me or any of my teammates. I show myself at 4 minutes, 45 seconds, Daniel. Do I have more time?
You do not have more time.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was fantastic.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for having me. I'll stop sharing.
All right. Well, let's go on to design warfare. I believe we have Wedge Bunker and Megan Vernier.
Hey, I'm not sure if Wedge was able to make it, so he asked me to show his stuff for him. I just got 2 slides. So these are wedges slides, so bear with me as I go through it. I'm one of the instructors for design warfare, and basically we take the business model canvas that was developed at the Stanford D School, and we've translated it to make more sense for the Air Force. And what we do is we'll go out, get 15 to 20 students in any cohort, and for 28 days, we go through the entire design process with them. The first week is more like a classroom setting. We go through the more educational parts. From that, weeks 2 and 3, they go out and they talk to people, they figure out problems, and then they work their way through the mission model canvas, and then have the presentations each week with the mentors and instructors to give them more feedback and kind of change their mindset, because a lot of these people come in very type A, want to solve the problems, that they go and talk to people, and we try and get them in that mindset that the best solutions are the people out there at the tactical level. They'll be able to come up with the solutions themselves. And so yeah, it's kind of looking, you can see the development, the evolution of design warfare from the D School, from L4I, Hacking for Defense, and then start at DIAS, pretty much as an MVP, as a way to teach innovation and innovation tools via design thinking. Then it moved to all of Global Strike, and we've gotten funding from ARCWERX to move on and up throughout the entire Department of Air Force, and hopefully very soon we'll be doing it at the Pentagon with a DoD level and with allied nations as well. So it's pretty exciting there. And it's just a little bit of data. I'm not going to read it off to you, but we have about 200 grads when an airman, because pretty much what we have so far, or guardian goes through, they can come back as a mentor. And then if they're high-speed mentor, they can come back as an instructor, and then go on and facilitate it from there. We, as the instructors, we travel. We can go anywhere to any base that wants us. We can either just have a cohort of students there, co-located, but we've also had a lot of success bringing people in to a base, because then they don't have any biases of the pre-existing issues that they might go and talk to people about. And it's a completely blank slate for them to go through that as well. Some of the other things, I'm not sure if it's talked about here or not, but we also talk about the SIBR and SITR process, the different colors of money, how to get funding, how to make that pitch, how to tell that emotional story to help get that buy-in, and then just the cross-mentorship as well between all the different airmen. It's a no rank course. Everyone wears business casual, and trying to think, there's so much more I could talk about, but hit stop sharing. If anyone had any questions or anything they want to talk about, I'm here.
Yeah, you have 1 minute left.
All right, got 1 minute, see. Yep, yeah, that's a good thing from Chris. So since ARCWERX pays for it, it's a zero cost to the unit. And typically the most expensive thing is just the lodging costs and per diem. And then for shorter modules, we've tested out a 1 week boot camp, but you're not going to get the same product out of it, because going through those 4 weeks and going through, we call them desperation week, where they go through and they have that realization that they're not the ones that are solving the problems. They're going out exploring, gathering the data from the people that they're talking to, and being the answer for them. It is, in a way, the selection is competitive, because we have about 50 people that apply for each one on average, and we can only take about 20 depending on the space and availability and the money available as well. So it is competitive, but just because we don't have unlimited money. But yeah, hit me up if you guys have any questions.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan, for presenting about design warfare. All right, and next up, we have presenting for the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting, which is near and dear to my heart, Brandon Smart.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me, and everybody, pardon the on-the-road briefing, so I don't have any slides, so I'll try to just create some visions through your imagination. A couple years ago, Captain John Margolick and I put our heads together and asked a question: why wasn't the Navy and the Marine Corps utilizing design thinking to solve complex problems more than it was. And we couldn't find anything other than, you know, paying money and going out and being a part of classes from external, but within the branches, we weren't utilizing it. So we decided at the point to take some of the classes that we've learned from speakers who are in uniform, and we created something called the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting, where we taught warfighter-centered design, which is a short design thinking class to teach staff NCOs, you know, your E6 and up, and mid-grade officers how to utilize design thinking skill sets and facilitate rooms full of Marines to get after complex problems that they're seeing, you know, at their level. It was, you know, a trial run initially that we hosted in Camp Lejeune at the allowance of the Brigadier General of the group, and then got the 3-star at the MEF level approval to continue the experimentation on the rest of the base. Since it's grown, and you all have access to it as well, it's Daniel can share the link to the website since I can't do it from my phone, but anybody can sign up for these classes that are hosted now online and in person, with, you know, COVID allowing. And what we teach is design thinking through a warfighter lens, and then also Scrum, which is, I think, a good transition point from the design phase. What do you do when you get actionable, anyone from the DoD, when you have actionable ideations, what do you do from that point? How do you get support, and then how do you put them into motion? And I think that the Scrum process, which is another thing that we partnered with Scrum Inc. To receive our training, and then I say I'm no longer working with the CA. I'm a student at Naval Postgraduate School. Prior to, created a bunch of partnerships to allow members from the DoD or anything that gets them there, which is on you, to join in any of our classes. We now have, and to keep this short and just create accessibility for you all, if you'd like to be a part of any of these programs and you'd like to do it in person or online, there's members who are teaching these courses all over the world at this point. So no matter where you are in the country and in several other countries, the CA has expanded and has continued through Naval X allowing it, which was the home port for the origins of Centers for Adaptive Warfighting. We've trained nearly 4,000 service members and DoD employees to date. And they're continuing to do so. That number might be up. It might be much larger than that at this point. And our focus point for expansion is just to continue to allow those who are passionate about changing things for the better in their services and in their companies and their battalions and their squadrons or whatever you belong to, in making things a better environment for a more diverse group of people, intellectually diverse and inclusive of all ideas, and people to enhance the services that and the organizations that we belong to. I think I should be at time right about now. Please, my email address is brandon.smart@NPS, Naval Postgraduate School, nps.edu. And I'll throw that into the chat as well. You can reach out to me if you have any further questions. I'd love to put you in contact with the new leaders of the CA, so that way you and yours can get involved in the program as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brandon. And one of the reasons that the CA is near and dear to my heart is because I launched Agitare on a CA cast on their YouTube. And their community has been like, I did their virtual warfighter-centered design course, and I was in the process of standing up the Hawaii Center when I PCS'd out to CyberWorx, where I am now. So they and I know that Air Force folks are standing up centers themselves on like Fort Meade and other Air Force installations. I consider Fort Meade an Air Force installation, by the way. And, all over the place. So it's definitely not only a Marine or Navy thing. It's very joint. And a lot of airmen have already gone through their pipelines. So excellent stuff. So next up, we have Toga, who's going to talk a little bit about his effort with designing space.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna share some slides here in just a moment. I'll change my background to be more appropriate for the topic. By the way, while I do this, these are great. This is going even better than I expected. So thank you, everybody. All right. So in summer of 2020, US Spacecom reached out to me and expressed interest in creating a design course for their combatant command. So for those that are unaware or unfamiliar, that's the organization responsible for warfighting in and through space. So it was sort of clever to be able to call it designing space, but there's an Agitare member, Cuss, who came up with that. I give him all the credit. So it was one of those moments for me when I think I will not accept that call. Hold on. Okay. It was one of those moments when I thought like, man, that sounds crazy. When do we start? Okay. So, and the start was essentially putting something on the calendar as a forcing function and then putting out a call for volunteers to help. And the response was so amazing that what was originally going to be like 3 half days, like turned into this much bigger thing. And ended up being one of the things that I am most proud to have been a part of in 27 years in uniform. So a dozen volunteered to be what we call lead learners and facilitate a handful of workshops for the 3 dozen learners who are doing workshops and assignments in between those workshops. And there's a full report on it, and I'll share that link at the end. And I'll just read from the intro page and give a few highlights. So Designing Space was an experimental course conducted virtually over the course of a month. The part-time program allowed students to practice a variety of designful attitudes and behaviors. This broad category of mindsets and methods includes concepts of creative conflict, strategic intuition, multimodal thinking, storytelling, creative confidence, growth mindset, and a bias to action. Indeed, the course was not only designed to share those ideas, but was itself the product of a designful approach to the challenge that inspired the entire endeavor. Broadly, that task was how to assist the US Spacecom in cultivating innovative warfighters. So though the teams did produce some actionable recommendations, the focus was less about solving problems and more about creating problem solvers. So we refer to this as the Karate Kid model. The point of the practice was not just to wax the car or paint the fence, though those were secondary benefits, but to prepare the individual for the competition that happens outside the training environment. Furthermore, as a prototype, the overarching objective was to create insights for future iterations. This report captures the most meaningful lessons in the summary and then offers a detailed synopsis of how the course unfolded, as well as issues we discovered along the way. And in the final section, there's specific recommendations for Spacecom, but generic recommendations that people on this call might find interesting. So the report has lots of details. I'll highlight just 3 things that I thought were really notable. The first thing had to do with artifacts. So we tried to offset some of the disadvantages of the virtual classroom by sending physical artifacts and packets that they opened up when we directed them to open it up. There was one big packet, and then there were little packets in between, and they were coded in such a way that we told them like what order to open them up in. So they had, some of them had Post-it notes or a reflection journal. We had Lego, that we did Lego Serious Play with them. And eventually there was a graduation certificate. So it was part of our closing ceremony. It was to open the last certificate, last packet, and then they had their own graduation certificate. The first thing that they got though was in that package, everything was wrapped up except a single piece of paper with a QR code. And that QR code led to an animated welcome video. So along the way, we were really trying to make it a fun and joyful activity. And that animated welcome video leads me to the second highlight, which it was very much about being a multimedia experience. So Agitare's own Cuss, same guy I mentioned at the beginning who came up with a name for this, he provided wonderful video support to advertise the event and to close out our time together with a graduation video. All those links are in that report. And then my son actually designed the graphics, which included the team. Each team had their own logo. It was inspired by the patch for the first manned space program. And those were also used for each team to have a Zoom background as well. And the third thing, one of the strengths was the diversity of those who showed up to help either in a specific module or to coach or just to play along, right? Each team had at least one person who came from outside the military, including civilian university faculty, design consultants in the private sector, the chief of innovation for Chick-fil-A, and even an elementary school vice principal, which was great. He was the one who actually did the outbrief to the general for his team. It was great. And so all those ingredients put together, and we set it on ludicrous speed. It created something pretty special. And I think many of those people are here actually. So thank you to them, and thank you for everyone else. I'll drop the link in here in just a moment.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, that event was a highlight of my design education. Honestly, it was like a perfect punctuation that kind of upgraded me in a lot of ways. So it's a really interesting model. Reminded me a lot of the Darden's immersive design thinking course a lot as well. So next up, we do have the designing space report in the chat there. I recommend you all take a look at that. Next up, we have ARCWERX, and Bobby Carbonell is going to share their design education program with you all.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everybody. Bobby Carbonell from ARCWERX. We are the innovation cell for the Guard and Reserve, but we work with a lot of people on this call across, total force. And Daniel's come down and helped us a couple of times with some of our facilitations, but basically education is one of our core lines of effort. And we educate people on how to do innovation, how to do design, how to think about problems, and then we connect them to resources, and then we help them facilitate these problems into real solutions. I'm going to highlight a couple of our education efforts here. We break them up into a couple of different things. So we have kind of by request, like one-day training. We have our quarterly Spark Summits, which are 3-day events. We have an innovation like lending library where people can borrow books. And then we're big proponents of the Defense Ventures program, and we try to get people to apply to those. So this course, Ignite the Entrepreneur, I worked on this with Roger Anderson from the Space Force and AFRL. And we've developed this course, and we're happy to share what everybody who wants to give it. It's basically a one-day entrepreneur mindset training. How do we get people to understand that they can be the ones that solve the problems in their work center, that they don't have to be Superman, that everyday airmen could be entrepreneurs. And even introducing the term entrepreneurs, because a lot of people have never heard it. And then we give them kind of a very light intro to lean startup concepts, and basically reinforcing the concept of just get started and start small and test your assumptions. We can do this class virtually or in person. It does work better in person, but we have figured out how to do it online. The Spark Summit, we're actually doing one in 2 weeks. This is where we've kind of turned this into a design-focused education session. We do a lot of think wrong training, but we have also incorporated other design modalities in here. And we want to teach people how to build really good problem statements and really unpack their problems so that they can leverage all of the resources of the DoD ecosystem. Because there's tons of resources out there for people to get free prototyping resources, free engineering support, all of these CyberWorx, all kinds of other things, but they all require somebody to have a very good grasp of their problem. And if they don't have a good grasp of their problem, don't know how to describe it in a way that shapes, the experience of the problem solver, then it's just not going to go anywhere. So we do these 4 times a year. We have one coming up in February, one in May, August, and November here in our big commercial innovation hub in downtown Tucson. We invite everybody who'd like to come out to come and register for this if you'd like. One thing that we're trying to expand and get the word out on, everybody has a reading list, but the reading list doesn't actually let you read the book. So we just bought all the books and put them into a digital lending library powered by a company called Overdrive. They have a little app called Libby, powers a lot of like public libraries. And we just give access to all the guardsmen and reservists who want one. And if anybody here would like access to it, and you can send me your military, an email from your military email, we'll get you access. We have over 50 titles, like design. We have a whole section on design. We have a whole section on like innovation and leadership. We have like a profiles on entrepreneurs and like inspiring stories. And so these are both in ebook and in audiobook formats. And then if you don't know about Defense Ventures, it's not our program, but we're big proponents of it. Is that we try to send people to it and pay their way to it if they're guardsmen. It's a way for people to get in-depth, hands-on knowledge on working in a startup or a venture capital firm. And it's a great way for them to get new ideas, learn how people are solving tough problems in the corporate for-profit sector, and then take some of those lessons and then bring them back to the DoD. So we've had about 14 people from the Guard go through it, about 14 reservists, and we've paid for more than half of these to go through it from our funding at AFWERX or ARCWERX, because it is a very high cost to send somebody to this training. So that's pretty much it. We do have a website. It's not great, but you can go there and see a little bit more about us, and people can submit problems and request training. That email address is no longer correct, so do not email that email address. I'm going to put in my email in the chat. If you want to send me an email, send it here. And if you want to get access to the library, just send me a note from your government email address and we'll get you set up.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Bobby. I'm a huge fan of the work that you all are doing at ARCWERX. And next up, we are joined by Siren Gaylord, who's going to talk about, I believe, the SOS think tank.
Yes, do I have screen share capabilities?
You should have those capabilities, yes.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen here. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. So I might go by Siren, but my first name is Destiny. I'm going to be looking at this screen, so I know it's kind of awkward to be able to have it here. But our overall program at Squadron Officer School, so I am one of the academic program managers for what we call strategic design. Basically, we're teaching the D-School, the Stanford D-School method, D-School to over 4,000 captains, that's active duty, reservists, guardsmen, guardians, civilians, you name it, whoever's going through SOS at that period in time, they get exposure to it. So these are the three pillars which we teach. So we have our leadership department, our strategic design department, and our joint warfare department. And what we specifically teach, if I can find my mouse, sorry, is walking the students through all of the phases of the design thinking methodology, and I've got the overall course flow here. So we introduce them to what it is, we expose them to some of the Stokes or the cool icebreaker activities, and usually we start that on a Thursday or a Friday, and we combine that with the first portion of that empathize.
Hey, Destiny. Looks like we're looking at your beautiful picture of the ocean and the mountains. Maybe that's a screensaver or a different.
It's just it's your background. We're not seeing the PowerPoint. So if you want to redo your screen share to the window, it should work.
Oh, okay. Screen share. Well, we don't need slides. I can continue to talk through it. No worries. As far as if you're familiar with the design thinking model, which if you're listening to the Project Everest representative, she basically went over that. As far as the course flow, we walk them through conducting an interview. We usually do that on a Friday, where they're able to have the weekend to practice going out and talking to people. Some people are pretty uncomfortable with that, so we like to introduce them to the uncomfortableness of that. And if I didn't mention, besides us teaching a multitude of students across different types of facets, active duty, guard, reserve, we also teach our think tank, which is what Daniel had mentioned. So For the portion of strategic design through SOS that is condensed into 1 week. So each day is basically a different workshop, and they're rolling through a process of figuring out an issue in their own organizations. So they have to really think back at something that they're trying to tackle back in their home unit. Maybe it's an organizational task saturation or something like that. So they'll use this methodology to be able to incorporate some new tools as well as some new methods to be able to hopefully go back to their unit and ignite some change. And if anything, just spark a conversation with their leadership back home in their home unit. But as far as think tank is concerned, that is a selective elective out of SOS, and it's over the course of 5 weeks. And we have been lucky to have Daniel even come in and talk about Agitare. We've had him as a guest speaker, but that is a selective elective where we have anywhere from 26 to 40, depending on our capacity at Squadron Officer School of applicants each class. And they are selected to come into the program based on a how might we statement that we pose. And it's usually pretty generalized statement of how might we better integrate our last one that we had, how might we leverage language and cultural expertise to enhance integrated deterrence. Super broad. No one even knows what integrated deterrence means. So they basically have to apply some thought process, and we have them do some fun and quirky different design thinking things in their application. And we walk them through the entire process over the course of 5 weeks. So they have the entire time while they're at SOS to be able to conduct interviews. They get about 2 weeks, and then they start working through the problem solving and defining space, and then everyone's favorite, the ideation phase, where they're doing all the cool post-its and forming solutions. And we do 2 vector checks, and those vector checks are usually by subject matter experts. So I love that I'm getting exposure to you guys here and definitely taking down all of this contact information, because we love and we usually struggle to find good mentors and good subject matter experts for some of the topics. And they range from a variety of things. The current one we're working right now is stigmas with resiliency, and they can take that whatever direction the team decides to do. It's made up of 4 teams, and we usually try to split those teams up based on the Jeff DeGraff genome survey, kind of exposing them to those different types of personality tests besides the 16 personalities that they get when they first enter SOS. And we do 2 vector checks, and then at the very end, we outbrief our AU commander, which is a 3-star, as well as someone has basically some type of pull or would be able to make some type of significant change based on the question that we're posing. So right now with resiliency, we're working with Department of the Air Force's A1Z unit that's specifically working towards resiliency and integration of changes towards that. But we've had different facets. We work with ACE, we've worked with tons of different entities for that final outbrief. So we're always looking to have more people in our program and incorporate more subject matter experts on that. So I wasn't keeping track of time despite my slide issue, but that's think tank and what we do as far as how we incorporate strategic design into our curriculum. It's right in the middle as far as Squadron Officer School is concerned. So they start off with leadership, doing all the cool project decks and obstacles and things like that. Then we roll them into how to solve problems together creatively, uncomfortably. And then they talk about doctrine and joint warfare and how that kind of ties in to potential JPP and all these different other types of methodologies that they may have learned or have had exposure to. So I will put my contact information. I work for Toga. He invited me here, and always good to see you, Daniel. So yeah, I'll put my contact information if anyone is interested in participating or helping future active duty captains out. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Destiny. That was fantastic. It's always kind of a joy to jump into those think tank events. And I love that they're getting that opportunity at Squadron Officer School, because having these skills is at that level. I'm also is so important. And I'm also seeing a lot of great chat in the Zoom chat, a lot of great conversation there about who else we could be targeting with that kind of targeted milestone in an NCO's career, for example. So
yeah, absolutely.
Excellent stuff. All right. Next up, I'd like to invite Michael Harbin to speak a little bit about his experience with I-Corps and put a little plug in for the Agitare Think Wrong Scholarship.
Awesome. All right, happy to be here. Hey, I became adjunct faculty for a 2-day innovation course. It's really just a introduction to innovation course while I was serving alongside with the National Security Agency. So I-Corps, the reason it's called I-Corps, it started with the National Science Foundation I-Corps program. It's kind of a 6 to 8 week cohort-based thing where people learn lean startup principles. And NSA said, hey, we can't tie people down for 6 to 8 weeks to do this. That's great, but how do we condense that and shorten this down? And they ended up with a 16-hour workshop. So I've been teaching that for the past couple of years, and it's been really successful. So I'll just read a little blurb here about what I-Corps is to give everyone a little understanding. Like I said, you learn about lean startup principles and in order to accelerate your mission outcomes. The workshop provides a fast-paced interactive learning experience that teaches students entrepreneurial tools and tactics pioneered in Silicon Valley and adapted for the DoD. Using science-based approaches, students learn the process and tools that can take them from having an initial idea to actual full-blown implementation. The curriculum integrates inquiry and discovery in a data-driven culture supported by rigor, relevance, and evidence. And participants are guided through modules designed to learn these new mindsets, how to deliver true value to customers, and several tools in order to document their findings and learn how to take the next steps as they iterate through that process of kind of entrepreneurship in order to solve customers' problems. A couple of things that I really like about it is it's module-based. The modules allow us to be very flexible in how we deliver. So I've delivered this obviously in 2 days, full 2 days in person, but then transitioned it to also be able to deliver this in 4 half days virtually. Works really well that way. We talk about vision and strategy setting. We talk about the jobs to be done theory from Clayton Christensen. We also talk about customer discovery. And then we also use the value proposition canvas and the mission model canvas that were previously mentioned from like design warfare and things, as well as a little bit of assumption mapping, experimenting, minimum viable products, prototyping, those type of things. And we kind of cap everything off with a case study of students that actually work through it. So very similar to kind of hacking for defense curriculum, design warfare curriculum, but just consolidated down to a 2-day, 16-hour workshop type thing. I really like the emphasis on customer discovery, since we're kind of supposed to be talking about what design means, how these courses relate to that. I really like the human-centered design aspect of it and the customer discovery aspect of really trying to push the idea of getting out there and talking to the end users and the end customers, something I don't think we're very good at across the board, at least with programs that I've seen in the Air Force. We roll things out and then we ask for feedback on how it's going, rather than switching that up. So really like I-Corps. Daniel also wanted me to talk about Think Wrong, so I'll briefly touch on that. I know we've got some people here in the call that have actually been through the Think Wrong training, so you're probably very familiar with that. And this is a class from a company called Solve Next. The Think Wrong Facilitator Intensive is I think it's now a 2-day or 3-day in person, but they also deliver it virtually over 14 sessions over the course of a month if they want to do that, in order to learn drills and exercises that can be used to put together design sprints. So the whole entire point of the course is to learn how to be a facilitator. Everything from, how do you put something together in terms of organizing it, the organization of it. How do you want flow from one drill to the next? How do you want people to come into the environment? What do you want people to take away from the environment after the design sprint? And really just give you kind of the tools and techniques for how to do that. And so that's Think Wrong. Very, very focused on getting people to understand that we're not talking about kind of the hairball inside the hairball. Incremental changes are not what we want. We're talking about how do we actually break away from that? They focus on how do we get out? How do we be bold? How do we think small? And those types of things. So really kind of break out of that mold and get away from the status quo. So it was a very fun class, very effective. Agitare actually kind of runs their scholarship program. This is a program that They allow a certain amount of seats per class that they give to kind of be a completely free grant for military members, veterans, and spouses, I believe. So Agitare runs that. I run that program for them to kind of coordinate that and come up with the best kind of best priority of who should be going to the class next. But they also do offer a government discount of half off the course price, I believe, if you cannot get a grant. So that's all I wanted to throw out there. If there's any questions, feel free to drop them. I'll try to get to them. If anyone wants to contact me, it's michael.harbin@us.af.mil. All right, that's it. Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I did appreciate having ICOR as part of my education kind of coming up in this space. And then also, we're mainly highlighting things that are free to airmen and guardians right now. And I would consider the fact that we do the scholarship to Think Wrong a venue to that. So I did want to highlight that as well, because we do have a pipeline, as small as it may be. It's a steady stream of people going through that training and applying it back to Air Force problems. And I'd consider it a really, for me, it was pretty foundational, the Think Wrong stuff. So next up we have from NSIN's Human-Centered Design Bootcamp, Kelly, and I believe it's Schulte, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Unless Kelly is not with us.
Oh no, I'm right here. Sorry.
Oh, cool.
Finding the mute button. You got the name spot on. Appreciate that.
Sweet. I'm so good at names.
I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen right here. Okay. So I'm Kelly Schulte. I'm the Bootcamp Program Manager here at the National Security Innovation Network. So just a little bit of a background on NSIN. We're a government program office whose main goal is to build networks of problem solvers. And so we create these networks through our 19 different programs, one of which is Bootcamp. So Bootcamp is a program that utilizes the concepts of human-centered design to solve problems. We work directly with units across the military, engaging with their leadership and their commands to identify problems unique to those units, while sourcing participants from within their unit and adjacent units to become the students and the main problem solvers throughout the program. So here are some of the units that we've worked with previously in the past. So how does it work? Our regional network team works to discover military units that are experiencing problems that are right for a boot camp. The main problem, or the main requirement, being that the participating unit has to have the technical capacity in-house to solve the problem themselves. So for example, a logistics unit isn't going to be able to come to us and work a boot camp to figure out a problem that requires an engineering solution. Here are some examples of problem sets we've worked on in the past. We go over a variety of topics, including design strategy, institutionalizing product owners, and then something for the airmen out there, airspace management. So after we found you and your problem, from there, we work together, figure out the logistics, and the entire process takes about 3 months from our first conversation to the first day of the program. So the program itself is taught by a team of instructors from UC Berkeley that are experts in human-centered design. The program can be spread out over the course of 3 days, 4 weeks, or anywhere in between. We just need to have 24 total hours of instruction scheduled with the participants and the instructors. So what happens during these 24 hours looks something like this. We start with anywhere from 15 to 40 students and begin the program with a thorough digestion of the problem itself. This is in an effort to identify subsets of the problem to work with. From there, we'll move into the second phase of identifying opportunities, where we break the students into roughly 5 to 6 teams who will each tackle a different subset of the problem. They'll conduct interviews with problem stakeholders, and then from there, move on to the third phase, exploring solutions and eventually beginning to develop their own solutions to these problem subsets. Lastly, throughout the course, we'll prepare them to create a pitch for their solution, which on the last day of the program will be judged by the unit's leadership, who then decides which solutions to move forward with and continue to provide support with. So we post our solutions and the progress throughout these courses on our Unum page, which I really encourage you to take a look at, especially our page for the 18th Airborne Corps, where underneath of the challenge tab, you'll see previous bootcamp iterations under the name of Dragon Innovation Team Training. You'll also see previous problems that we've worked with, as well as other ensign programs. And we have this page up, not in an effort to only showcase our work, but also to allow other units experiencing similar problems to save resources and take a look at the solutions we've already generated instead. Now, for the best part, bootcamp, like most ensign programs, is completely free for the units. All that's asked for from the unit is that they're able to contribute their time and their unit's dedication throughout the entirety of the program. And very importantly, they need to be able to prove prematurely that their leadership has the authority and resources to move the solutions that are generated during the program forward and out into the real world, so they don't just die out as a cool idea. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for your time. And if you need to reach me, you can shoot me an email straight at bootcamp@ensign.us. That'll go straight to my email. You won't get any automated responses. It'll come right back from me.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly. I have also been through this program, and I am a fan. I went through it when Ensign was MD5, I believe is what they were called. So next up, I would like to have Ethan Eagle share very quickly about Project Mercury. Dr. Eagle, are you in the house?
Awesome. I will do two things if possible. One, I'll drop our syllabus into the chat. Is that going to work? Cool.
Oh,
and
wow.
my slides, because I'm not going to do the hit you with all of the logistics information. If you are really interested in that, I created this I answered all the questions for the homework on this Google Sheet. But what I am going to share with you is a little bit about the philosophy of the program. I'll try and give you some of the answers, but rather than be kind of formulaic and read from a script, I'm going to be off book and just use my slides. So if you want to become an innovator with Project Mercury, it's pretty easy. You contact us and sign up on our website, projectmercury.us. We're launching a cohort in January 24th. It's just around the corner, but around that corner, cohort 7, we'd love to see you. So if you're here and interested in this space, we're a community of practice. So I'm going to try and get through the 4 questions in the 3 minutes. I got 2 minutes left. And there's our website, projectmercury.us. So, well, who is it? What are our OKRs? What's the future? And can folks from the Department of Air Force collaborate with us? I like to think about, so somebody said you don't have to be a superhero to innovate, but I do think it's useful to understand what you bring to a team, and that the Avengers or a single superhero rarely is totally competent in all areas. And that's kind of what Project Mercury is about. It's a team of teams approach to bringing people who have similar values together, right? We're hopefully the heroes and not the villains in the story. But we want to understand, hey, we're not all going to approach the problem the same way. The big, strong guy is going to try and punch the problem in the face, but maybe there's a better, more strategic approach coming around the corner. We do focus on the people in the program, not just what they produce. And we think that that's important, right? We're really developing a community, just like the NSIN group. It's a network of people that are connected after they graduate, and not just the programs that they work on while they're with us, but what's the project that happens after that and the project that happens after that we're really most interested in. So far, we've graduated 178 people, so it is a certified program through the University of Michigan. It is free to enlisted and officers in the Air Force. And there's a second level of training after you've graduated once. We invite people who have been really engaged participants to come back with us as peer mentor coaches, and 43 people have completed that. But again, the goal here is to focus on the individual and figure out what are you really unique at? How are you transforming yourself so that you can transform the Air Force? We are built on the competing values framework of Kim Cameron and Bob Quinn. It's now called the Innovation Genome, which is following some of Jonas Salk's work and sort of ideas are the new genes. So thinking about how you can create value around those. I'm already out of time, so let me just say that we help you define creativity and kind of like understand how individuals intersect with teams and intersect with a larger bureaucracy. The future of Project Mercury really is trying to understand the future of applied creativity in the Air Force. We have 2 more funded cohorts, and beyond that, it's unknown for us. But we will be visiting a number, I think 8 to 10 bases with some of the pieces of our program. So the program is 12 weeks, but we're going to be doing some 2-day on-sites throughout 2022. We're really looking at alumni as the first places we go, but if you're super interested in bringing us to you, you can reach out to me. And I want to leave you with kind of like, pay attention to who and what is giving and taking your energy. And really, we look forward to collaborators that want to bring something interesting to the table. I know a number of the people on this Zoom call are alumni of the program and hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, go to that Google Doc and add comments there, and I'd be happy to answer those questions about specifics, other answers that I didn't have time for. Thank you, and back to you, Daniel.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ethan. That was a wonderful presentation, and you really have a lot of supporting materials there, which is helpful for the audience. Up next, we are over time, but I guess I should have expected that. Well, I'm just going to speak really quickly because I'm the last speaker about CyberWorx. This is where I work. Air Force CyberWorx is located at the Air Force Academy. And we are almost like an internal design consulting firm for Air Force, Space Force, and other organizational, other branches and agencies. We tend to design the design of every project that we take on. So they all look different. There is not a standardized process. And my main focus there is facilitation. But we also end up doing a lot in the realm of education. It's one of our tiers. It's one of our primary lines of effort is education. We want to give people human-centered design capabilities. And my favorite example of that since I've been there was probably the work we did for the 319th Mission Support Group, which was I believe it was 4 weeks in concert with the University of North Dakota. We took a cohort of about 15 airmen through a design sprint, and we were very meta about it. We did a lot of explaining why we were doing the things that we were doing. And my primary measure of effectiveness was not, are they aware of these tools? Are they aware that these practices exist? Because anybody can go out and find a series of steps for innovation, or some course or some certification for innovation. I was more curious whether we could actually equip people with mindsets and reflexes that make them capable of applying the right tools when the situation is complex. So one of the things that I did with that program, which I think was unique, I've been through a lot of courses. I've been through a number of introduction courses to design thinking and human-centered design and innovation processes. And one thing that I always felt was lacking was what, there was always the what, like the process, the tool, right? There, here's what you do, or the steps that you take in order to achieve outcomes. But a lot of them were lacking in this, infusing people with the capacity to shape those tools when the situation went wrong. And as a designer and an innovator, the situation almost always goes wrong. Your best laid plans as a facilitator and a designer will encounter something unexpected. And the thing that makes you capable of navigating and adapting to that, many courses are missing. So what I tried to do was I tried to scare the participants with concepts about complexity, because I was thinking, I want them to have an emotional trigger. I want them to, I borrowed a little bit from this idea of the bulletproof mind, which is police training that creates reflexive responses in law enforcement officers, often to deleterious effects. But when you're thinking about navigating complexity, what you want is their reflexes to be good, rather than for them to just pull from a recipe book or a rote series of steps, right? And I have 1 minute remaining to talk about CyberWorx. So I'm trying to talk about why this was slightly different from any training that I'd received, and it's because I incorporated that aspect. And I encourage them, as I do in all of my facilitated workshops, I encourage them to deviate from the steps I was giving them with the intent in mind. And then we would reflect on whether they had achieved the intent and what we could do to deviate further still from the steps that we had determined. So it was, okay, there's the steps, there's your hexagons, but then I was mainly interested in what does insightful deviation look like, because that's what makes for good designers in my view. And that's what I was mainly interested in activating in them. And I felt pretty confident in our capacity to do that. CyberWorx still takes on educational projects. It's just at the behest of our bosses, and we are owned by Air Combat Command. So if they determine that it's worthwhile for us to take something on, it can be educational or it can be problem solving. The workshop that we did last week was for the future of enlisted education. And it was a futures workshop, and it also had a significant educational component to it, in that we were teaching all of the participants practices of being a futurist, which was, educational for me as well, but our very own Austin Wiggins is much more trained in those aspects. So I've found that facilitated workshops often, especially when you are dealing with a new cohort, involve some sort of educational component. And my time is up for CyberWorx, but I do want to put a little pitch in for Agitare, as I had intended to do. Agitare is a community of practice, because after going through a bunch of courses in human-centered design and facilitation and other design and ICOR, and I went through the NSIN course and all of that, I struggled significantly when I was no longer part of a team that was actively engaged in these practices. And what I realized, especially after seeing some of the facilitators that I respected most go for a period of just a couple of weeks without facilitating, and then they felt like they weren't prepared because they hadn't been keeping their chops up, to use musical language. And I realized that facilitation is this thing that you need to keep just working at. Like it needs to be a practice. It needs to be kind of a lifestyle with others in order to actually grow and continue to expand your capabilities. And courses don't do that for you, right? So the ideal scenario in the commercial setting is that you become a facilitator and then you facilitate, and that's how you keep your chops up. In the military context, what I realized is that as a lone practitioner, you can go to all the courses you want, but it's very difficult to convince people to give you their time to do design and facilitation work. So we created Agitare to create space for people to have the opportunity to get the reps in, to talk about the meta concepts of facilitation and design. And now it also incorporates concepts of complexity thinking, complex facilitation, sense making, and futures work. So that is why Agitare exists, is because especially within the DoD and the government space, having gone through a course isn't enough. That's just having the tool in your tool belt. But having a community of supportive practitioners to discuss and grow and explore with is actually worth more than the initial training, because you can actually get the initial training just from a good mentor, in my experience, or from reading it and then just trying it and failing on a bunch of people. That actually works better than training. So that is Agitare. You can find us at agitare.org or agitare.def.org. And Toga, do we have some? We don't.
Bill departed. That's okay. That information and those that weren't able to speak today are going to be included in all the stuff that we're going to package. It's my keep myself busy while deployed plan. I'll just, as we get to close out, I'll just say my last bit. You know, I started at the beginning talking about the chef soiree in my hometown of Covington, and in 1999, that's where I proposed to my wife, and that's worked out pretty well. So I have a proposal of sorts for you today. One, if you've done, you know, you've heard some of these people have done multiple things. If you're one of those people who've done like 4 or more, send me a note because I have some specific questions for you. I'll put my contact information in the chat right now. The other 2 are more sort of philosophical proposals for you. One, please take some inspiration or information from today, reflect on it, and integrate it into what you do. And then the second proposal is keep in touch with all these people so that we end up doing more of these things better together. And I think that's how we all advance our individual things and collectively. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you everyone else for being here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This will mark our soft close for the event. You are welcome to stick around and chat. Again, we had intended for there to be a longer group discussion, but our showcase ended up having too many great people on it. So, you know.
If there is time, people do want to stick around. I would love to talk about what the accelerator is doing for education in conjunction with CyberWorx for a couple minutes, if that's all right.
Yeah, you are absolutely welcome to do that as the kickoff to our after party discussion.
Awesome. All right, I'll try and meet with everybody else, 4 minutes or less. So Captain Vic Salsa Lopez, I'll kind of explain who the heck I am first. So Reaper Guy, we stood up a new unit about 2 years ago at MIT, and we are the Artificial Intelligence Accelerator. Our charter is a trilateral agreement between the Department of the Air Force, MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and MIT main campus, first of its kind to embed active duty airmen into research programs to advance the state of the art of artificial intelligence. However, our mission is really to make AI real for airmen and guardians. And as we started realizing what that meant, we realized that meant artificial intelligence education. But in the true airman fashion, we realized that if we give a mouse a cookie, they're going to want a glass of milk. And airmen, if you teach them artificial intelligence education, very quickly want to go and use that in the real world. And so we realized that we needed to get together. So we talked to CyberWorx, where Daniel, I think, came from, Lincoln, MIT, contracting, and put together a ideation workshop, not only to help from CyberWorx teach design thinking and organizational concepts with problem decomposition and UX design, but also thinking about how do we build a system and identify a narrow use case that artificial intelligence can actually get after. So we went for the test and evaluation community first. This is the first time we've ever run this. It's a beta in the fashion of everybody else. I will drop the welcome packet that we sent to everybody there in the chat. Hopefully that will, there it goes. And so this is kind of what they came up with things that they wanted to work on. Our DLOs were to have them understand narrow artificial intelligence use cases and where they can be applied, decompose their operational challenges into their component parts with human-centered design is a huge part of that, and then understand and plan for all the technical debt and sustainment tail associated with different AI systems, and then effectively use COTS, SCOTS, or National Lab Support for the challenge. So very similar to Megan's proposal on they need to learn colors of money, at least a little bit, so that they can affect an effective plan to go after it. It's a multi-month program where we combine digital university education with VTCs with CyberWorx, VTCs on artificial intelligence education from ourselves, our partners at Lincoln Laboratory, and they're going through exploring different operational challenges and trying to really identify narrow AI use cases that could help them, or at least design their systems for a future artificial intelligence system to make a better prediction. This is a quick overview of the education that we have at Digital University. In addition to the challenge ideation that we teach on the Kaizen model, trying to break down and decompose, and throughout the cohort, they're getting education. We're doing bi-monthly debrief and challenge explorations, VTCs with ourselves. They go back and realize that their problem needs to be refined. They continue to refine it. We give them some more education step by step. We're almost through our first cohort now in this beta test with the test and evaluation community. We're going through contracting next, and then we're going to have a capstone on site at MIT the 24th and 25th to go through the final 5 projects that were selected of the 17 that were briefed from the different students. However, we are only 14 airmen at the accelerator. So if this sounds interesting, we are looking for a way to transition this into someone else's education platform. So we would love to partner with different folks to see where does this fit? Does it fit at SOS? Does it fit in PME? Does it fit at basic training? Maybe it fits it's somewhere else. And happy to have those conversations. I will drop my contact info in the chat room. Thanks, Daniel, for helping me in the last couple minutes.
Yeah, fantastic. No, this is excellent. And I see a lot that out of CyberWorx, we had Larry Marine is kind of guiding the human-centered design aspect to that. Larry is a deep practitioner in the realm of user experience design. And it's been really interesting. One of the things that I like about working at Air Force CyberWorx is that we have a multidisciplinary team there. So as we're designing the design effort for, whatever we're doing, we end up with often disagreement among the different practitioners, but we usually end up with some kind of hybrid model that incorporates all of their strengths, which, probably fits neatly into Ethan's, competing values framework, the idea of people at different poles of those dynamics kind of working together. You often end up with more interesting solutions. So wonderful. Our plan here is to take the materials that we generated as a result of this event and put them into a catalog of sorts to share out with a larger community. So it hasn't just been for this audience that we had the presentations. It's also been a way of kind of trying to attract people that we weren't aware of to this event so that we could find out what else exists that we didn't have the foresight to include. So I would also like to put it to the group to, is there anything missing that was not presented that you're aware of that is providing significant design education to airmen and guardians?
There have been a couple of things I've seen over the last 2 months on LinkedIn that are AFWERX funded, but happening not in the United States, but for airmen. And I don't have all of the details at top of mind, but I was interested when I heard about stuff's happening at Rammstein or stuff's happening in the UK, and like, what is it?
Yeah. I think both of those are design warfare cohorts, actually. So the presentation that Megan did, that's what AFWERX is kind of investing in at the moment, is the design warfare. They did UK. They also had a Rammstein cohort as well, I believe. Not yet? Oh, okay. Is that coming up or something?
You should keep spreading the rumor.
Megan, we're not getting you. Thank you so much, Toga, for kicking this off and for helping me out with organizing it. It has been fantastic.
Y'all are awesome humans. Thank you. Keep rocking.
So my question for the folks that are hangers on is like, is there a WWE SmackDown version of which of these, like, who's the best wrestler of the year? right? Like what I feel like once you know about all the other design education efforts, the question that I have in my competitive spirit is, great, well, like, let's go head to head and see, like, right, that in a friendly way so that we can improve, right? And then next year, everybody's, you know, again, undefeated. But is that like, what are the potential outputs of now we know each other? Is it a shrinking pie and everybody's fighting over rice bowls, or is there like a bigger, more ambitious arena that we can be all sort of competing in and getting, you know, clicks and likes and views and I don't know, whatever the metrics are for what gets funded?
That's funny. I honestly, in the first couple of years of going through a bunch of different courses, I had in my head a comparison of all of them. I was like constantly comparing this program to that program to that program. But I think it's so personal what actually resonates with you. And then also it's so dependent on what problem you're actually trying to tackle when you're using the methods, that there is no way to actually compare one program to another. I also think a lot, like I recommend that to a lot of people that they check out the Joint Special Operations University courses, but I also know that they would be highly alienating to people who don't think like me. They're just so deep in theory and like they're almost ideally suited to people who are of a specific type of mindset. And they're not, and then there's this whole aspect of on-ramps that aren't so steep that somebody doesn't have to have built up significant momentum in order to make it to the top, right? So I don't even feel like I can be objective about the quality of a program anymore, especially as it relates to what gets people into the practice versus what enables them to be a deep practitioner, because I think those are two very different things.
Yeah, Daniel, I threw out in a chat, you know, I recommend like a Skyrim skill tree where, you know, you have what do you want to get to a destination where you want training, but it's almost been really beneficial right now. You know, they call it the design insurgency for a reason. It's almost really beneficial that kind of like the global insurgencies, you've got these guys over there doing stuff at Naval X with the COD. You've got design warfare doing their thing. You've got, you know, all these different, so that by having this massive volume of opportunities, you can link in and connect into what's available at your time with your resource base that you have to put towards it. I think, you know, and then you get crosstalk too, that like this, that gets really powerful, where it's like, hey, have you heard of what they're doing over here? And then somebody picks that up, and then, I mean, they design it, they incorporate it, then they find their own flavor of it, and then they share it back, and then everybody else moves forward. So I think it's pretty powerful. I was sharing with Sarah separately, I kind of ran headlong into the land of no, or the no because thinking earlier this week. Really hard. So Megan, yep, I found them, and it's something else. So the antibodies are all still out there, unfortunately. So I think it's just one of those things that we need to do well, I guess I can throw the Lord of the Rings, you know, we need the army of the dead to swarm it and bring it down, because it's still such a fight. And I'll pause there.
Not to mention there are 330,000 people in the Air Force alone, let alone across the Joint Force, that need exposure, if not education, to design concepts. So, and there's like, I don't know, we had about 50 people here. So I'm sure there are others we haven't canvassed yet, but that's a pretty high ratio. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love to see the grassroots efforts kind of springing up and then see what their difference is. Because I've also noticed like there's such a significant difference of culture across different Air Force silos that I don't think, it's kind of like I-Corps was a very well adopted approach within the agency. Some of the other methods that we tried to bring in were not as well appreciated. So you can't make an objective determination without considering viability for a context. And that the viability for a context goes down to the individual level almost, I think. Like, yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was wonderful to see you again and hear from you about Everest.
Yeah, you too, Daniel. Take care. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you.
Take it easy. Don't overdo it.
All right. Anybody else have anything before we close?
Megan's question in the chat is really good.
And I just threw in there for that challenge in particular, where it's like, how do you avoid that perception of innovation theater? I really love that the CAW WCD talk about the shotgun blast approach of training as many people as you possibly can. It seems like that's what the CAW was doing. In their course, they use like a sheet that's like basically, dear boss, after you get through diverge, converge, and boil it down, dear boss, here's the problem. Here's what we need. Here's why it'll fail. Here are the resources we see that we need. So I think that kind of like tangible deliverable can kind of help, because I hate to say it, you've just got a culture that asks, going into anything, what am I going to get out of this? So being able to lead turn that and say, we are going to give you a proposal and we can show you the math. And I keep telling people that this actually shows the math. It's a process. It's a structure-driven process. It's a structure-driven process proven by decades of use. And still, you still run into resistance. But I think that kind of a tool is really, really helpful. I think you guys did it definitely with the mission model canvas and the outbriefs and everything. So that's just one thing that popped to mind to me.
I would add to that one thing about if you're an academic program that people approach with the sort of checkbox mentality of like, I'm going to get through your 4 weeks and then I'm done, and you're going to give me the thing and I'm going to go back to my regular job. Or, right, we've struggled in Project Mercury to say like, no, this is up to you to carry on. Like, we've given you the toolkit and the Batman utility belt, and like, now you got to go fight crime. And like, crime is always there. So like, we're not done. You have the new tool. So like, it's, trying to show them, hopefully give them enough of the flavor of this was fun and validating, and I saw the value, that I'm going to go back and do it myself. And hopefully, like Daniel said, right, that community of practice is so important for that. And for all of the programs that are less than 8 weeks or whatever, however long James Clear says it takes to build a habit, I just feel a lot of sympathy and empathy for like, that's not enough time for people to experience like the real pull of we call it going native. So we do a 1 week intensive and then everybody goes back to their day job and they're like, I don't have time for this. And you're like, I know, like that now, okay, let's have the real conversation about how are you really going to make innovation a priority or design thinking a priority, because it has to compete against all of the other priorities. And that's how you sort of get out of this, like, great, when I got together with the whole cast and we did the show, but now I have to go back to my real job. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, like, what improv skills are you bringing back with you? Or just like, make sure that they translate back to their, their native work environment.
So that reminds me, I've taken to, sometimes all I have with a group is a workshop. Like, it's just, I have a couple of days with you and we're going to do something. I'm going to effectively kind of constrain you in such a way that we hopefully produce some kind of useful output. But I now tell people that whether the outputs of that are useful or not, I hope that something happens to them during the event itself that makes them change their behavior afterwards. Like it, and so I think that there's this nonlinear, complex, emergent thing that you can call out specifically and say, you know, maybe we'll produce really interesting design outputs of this effort, but maybe it's going to be the Hawthorne effect where your behavior is going to change because you were part of the experiment, right? And that's going to be the most effective thing that happens, right? Thank you, Megan, so much for joining us. I've been thinking a lot about that community of practice thing, though, because that's the piece that I think I see Project Mercury kind of very specifically. One of the only players that I see specifically kind of speaking to it. But I do wonder how effectively that's, you know, happening across the Air Force with these kinds of practices.
Yeah, and it's I think you shared the Medium article about like inside out versus outside in.
Yeah.
And like Project Mercury is certainly an outside in. We're really encouraged, like this cohort will be more different than every other one because I'm on paternity leave. And so it's actually up to most Air Force people to do some work, which is, I mean, it's also, that's, you know, it's one of the things about design thinking and coaching and facilitation is like, ultimately you're trying to put yourself out of a job, right? Is like, if you give the team its own capabilities, then great. Like the whole goal is for you not to be necessary, for self-organization to take over and for you to empower or just like show people that that's a possibility, that possibility exists. But absolutely the like how at the National Security Innovation Network brought this up, right? Like they're trying to create networks. Yeah, and that's absolutely, you know, what is necessary is get people together again and again, right? It's like you have to let those relationships develop and evolve. And I mean, I provocatively said, you know, we need a WWE SmackDown event, but really what I mean is like we need regular intersection so that we can see what other people are doing and we don't forget, right? We're not just operating in our own silos, self-aggrandizingly or not, but just like, oh, look, you know, look at that football team's performance compared to ours. Like how it's not so that we can say one is better than the other. That's not my goal. My goal is to say like, you've invented the spread offense. Wow, like, wow, that's transformative. That's changing everybody's practice because we're a community and this is how we perform in practice. And like, it's useful to see how other teams perform in practice in a, you know, in like a performative or competitive way, because that's how best practices can sort of be shared and spread.
Yeah.
Hey, Daniel, I gotta go. I just wanted to say bye and have a good chat.
Thanks for joining us, Michael. Elizabeth, yeah?
So yeah, I wonder what that would look like in action, right? If the WWE SmackDown concept, right? Does that look like having more of these type of events where you're bringing people in, kind of saying, like, hey, these are my success stories, these are my failures. A part of what my team is starting to do is trying to normalize failure as just part of the construct of getting people to embrace innovation and iterative change. So we started this Failure Fridays. So we invite people to like, just, hey, talk about how you failed in this innovation space. We're now talking through, because, right, I think a lot of people start to, as we're beginning to normalize failure, also look at it as, oh man, like all you're doing is just like in a public medium talking about how bad, you know, the Air Force or the DoD sucks at things. So we played around with the idea of like, well, what if we, oh, I love this. Thank you, Ethan. so we also played around with like Wednesday wins, where so not only am I like also trying to normalize failures, but also saying that there are some successes. It's not all failures. Like you can distill some wins from this. So I wonder if high five Wednesdays, oh, I love it. So yeah, I wonder if even part of that, like what that looks like in action, is a little bit of kind of normalizing both of the culture. That yes, we're so competitive and like sometimes we're going to lose, and that's okay. But we're still going to celebrate the winners because we're all on one team.
Elizabeth, are you with Morpheus?
I am.
Yeah, great.
We're a product of Project Mercury. Like
I had no idea.
You're the birth child of one of the outputs from one of your cohorts. So you should count us as one of your wins.
No, I definitely do. We're very happy about the strategic studies group and all of the work that they did.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about a lot of their initiatives to try and be that convening function. Nate, to answer your question, they're kind of soliciting whoever wants to jump on and speak, and then it's hosted by Kinsley Jordan as like he's like the DJ for who's sharing next, and they kind of just chat and do story sharing that way. So it is kind of like it's a storytelling mode, kind of one after the other. But it seems like they're standardizing the process of requesting to be on the program through a form is the last that I saw.
Yeah, we'll open it up. So essentially you can join on the live. There's a limit of 5 people just on the medium that we use. And so there's usually 2 or 3 of the members of the team that are kind of like all just sharing stories, and then we'll bring guest speakers on for Nadia's response. It is sometimes a struggle, but you'd be surprised at like how excited people are right now to start talking about their struggle. Because I think you're talking about your failure, but through the lens of looking at it as a success, because you learned something. And that's ultimately what a lot of the stories end in, is like, that was an epic failure. However, I tremendously won, this learning experience.
The other thing to this question of what was it, WWE Clash or whatever Ethan called it. I'm not that familiar with WWE, so you'll have to bear with me. The thing where you get them all.
WWF, except less pandas.
Oh yeah, World Wildlife Federation. Yeah. So I was talking to somebody from the Morpheus team about this actually recently, that this event, the bringing a bunch of people together within a specific sphere of influence, like a specific domain, and getting them to share what they're doing, their current successes, their current throughput, who they're targeting, their methods, that kind of thing in a sequence as a showcase could be a portion of a mapping method. I've done ecosystem mapping. I've done events where people now see me as the anti-map guy, because I have been raving that we've been doing this whole mapping thing all wrong. You create this static 2-dimensional top-down view of basically chains of command, and it means nothing. It doesn't inform action in the slightest. It doesn't let me know what they do or how they work or how they influence each other or what they are in comparison to each other. It doesn't inform action in the slightest. So what I proposed was that you start with categorical information. For example, design. Like design is a category of agent within the system. And you host an event in which you have them interact with one another and force them to recognize their differences and their similarities, right? And then you use that interaction to glean more useful and probably more nuanced information than you would get by simply reading their webpage. And it's mainly from the interaction. It's not from the actual showcase, because the showcase is going to be what's on our website, right? And by getting people to react and respond and ask questions of them, you will start to see what are the equivalent of the, the concept of desire lines in human geography. It's like where the grass is dead between the corners of sidewalks, right? You only find the desire lines in this map by forcing interaction between these agents. And so what I proposed to Melinda Monahan, who's on the Morpheus team as well, was that if you want a map of the defense innovation ecosystem, you do it by starting with categorical information. You create complex interactions during events, and then that categorical information is, boom, there's like a burst of current knowledge about it. You articulate that somehow on a map, which can say, here are the decisions you can make within this particular domain. And then the next month you do a different category, and then you see if you can fit that into the same map, or you build a different map off of it. So that's my deviation from your make them fight, rather make them just interact and see what happens.
This is welcome edits. So I really was just like, great. We've all seen each other now. Like, are we gonna?
Yeah.
This is the Bloods. Like, are we Jets and Sharks? Like, should I start? Because I do think that there's a part of me that is always aware of the sort of like scarcity versus abundance. And like when I see a lot of other people all doing this very similar things, it's like, are we all just redundant? And now that we've shown everybody that there's a lot of redundancy, somebody's going to walk in and be like, okay, so most of you are pawns and we're going to move you off the table. And there's the king and queen, the real pieces that are necessary to play chess. And like, no, it's like useful to have all these other pieces, for like a really interesting game. I find myself occasionally more fearful than anything that like, I want there to be a collaborative spirit, but also I recognize that like, I'm more energized by trying to win or that like, that gets it gets me to focus on like, how can I really be excellent in a way that just saying like, oh, wow, it's so nice to just all get together. And like, but where's the urgency or the like catalyst to act that's provided by that? And I find that that's one of the tensions, right? Is it's really useful to just collaborate and find a community, but it's also useful to say, no, I bet I could beat you. Let's race. Yeah. So just finding that and exploring how, how can we do that? And like I said, in a friendly way, or just like great, we're mapping our ecosystem, but like part of that map, I don't know if anybody's seen the map of like all of the design, right? And every dot is the same size. And I'm just like, well, that's kind of useful, but like, what if the scale of the dot was like how many people it had? Because then it's like multi-dimensional information. That would be really useful. So if the map was like, how many people is the National Security Innovation Network is goddamn enormous.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. But like, now I'm a tiny insurgent, upstart, and like, are we doing the same thing as them? Should we just join them? Right. I don't know. Those are some of my freeform thoughts. I know everybody else has said their dinner is on the table. I'm sure my wife is also looking for me. We just have we have a 6-week-old downstairs, so I'm gonna go. Sorry for the abrupt exit. Nate, it's great to see you. We've traded emails, and it's good to see you in person. Sorry we didn't get to chat more. Daniel, as always, awesome.
Thanks, Ethan. It's good to see you. Nate, I'm sorry we did not get you in the showcase. I almost want, well, I do want to include you in it if it would be possible. Do you want to do your spiel right now, and then I'll edit it in?
Sure. I don't really have a spiel, but I'm happy to tell you about kind of what JSAL's got going on.
Sure, do it, and then I'll clip it in.
Okay. Yeah, apologies to cut some travel and some unexpected connectivity challenges, but thanks for the opportunity and the invitation to participate and to see everybody's faces. JSAL has been in the design game probably for, if I had to guess, 6 years, maybe 7 years in earnest. And it probably started out with 1 or 2 courses before my time, and now has a portfolio approach where they've got dedicated courses to creative thinking and creative problem solving, which likely fall under some definitions or umbrellas of design. They end up being more holistic in their approach with a focus on facilitation of deliberate creativity methods without espousing any one particular model. So you'll find applications of Lego Serious Play, of the Russian model called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z, Synectics, Osborne Parnes creative problem solving, human-centered design, etc. And there's an online course, fully online, that we got pushed into via COVID called SOC 3470, which is sort of an orientation to individual level creative style or creativity preferences via the creative problem solving preference measure called Foresight, F-O-U-R-S-I-G-H-T. So we use that psychometric instrument as a vector to help people think about their own relationship to the creative process. And we scaffold up all of our educational experiences on top of that individual level awareness to help people become more effective at team-based creative problem solving in soft specific contexts. From there, we've got a facilitation course. So one of the demand signals we got after working with units over the last couple of years was, hey, we love this stuff and we don't want to have to call you guys out to do it for us every time. How do we become facilitators ourselves? And we said, hey, that's great. Facilitation is equal science, art, and reps. It's practice. So if that's what you really want, get institutional commitment and commit to us that you will do some right seat, left seat over the course of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, until you have a library of experiences and a toolkit that you can draw from. And we'll be sort of on that journey together. And I don't know what that looks like in terms of scalability, but I do know that we can help some people become facilitators. We've been effective at that. And they've since left their organizations and moved on to other elements within the DoD and some out in private practice. So we've seen some success there. And that's our SOC 4470 Facilitator Tools and Techniques course. And then on the specific design lane, we've got what's called SOC 2440, which is an applied design tailored scenario experience. So if a unit has a very specific requirement up to TSSCI, they can ask for design facilitation support, and we'll send a group of people through a hybrid educational / application experience with an intended outcome sponsored by a commander. And then you've got our 2 core 3440 45, which are basic design fundamentals course, as well as the advanced design course. And now an online version of sort of a hybrid of those two. It's called SOC 1440, and it's a 6-week virtual course that, again, because of COVID, we had to be able to push or sort of invite participation from around the world in that virtual environment. So you can get sort of the wave tops of design, the JSAL flavor of design, at least, through SOC 1440. And a lot of that's inspired by, it's a multidisciplinary approach we think of ourselves as sort of being agnostic to any particular methodology. However, in large measure, it's applicable to operational and strategic level problem sets. So conceptual design, as opposed to like building a new widget or, you know, a human-centered design of an experience or something like that. And it's largely inspired by the work of Shimon Nabe and systemic operational design coming from the Israeli Defense Forces. So in a nutshell, I'd say that's the high points of sort of the JSOW design, creativity and design package. And again, thanks for the opportunity to share. Break.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I don't feel okay showcasing design education without including JSOW. They're one of the primary resources that in Agitare we kind of guide people towards to get an understanding of some of the underlying meta concepts that are, I think, glossed over in a lot of approaches. You know, they'll hand you tools, but not exactly explain why or when they work. Whereas in the JSOW courses, there was a lot of exploration of those underlying, you know, almost psychological and sociological theories that enable, you know, facilitative practices to function.
Yeah, I could build on that real quick. I'd just say that one thing that I think might be unique about the JSOW program is that we have a lot of faculty adjuncts who aren't military. So civilian academics and civilian creativity and design professional facilitators of practice. So people who have truly been living and breathing the work of design across a variety of contexts, who can come in and bring really unique angles. Now, on the one hand, it's advantageous because you now are able to triangulate experiences across different contexts of what design looks like when it's applied in these different kinds of scenarios, right? On the other end of that equation, however, is you've now imposed what I call a translational burden on your military participants. They now have to think about what that would mean for them in their context. So, you know, relative trade-offs exist in that scenario. However, I think it's advantageous to have civilian academic or civilian practitioner adjunct faculty in your program, no matter what methodologies you're working with, just to help people think about the wide range of applications of design and what it looks and feels like across these different contexts.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really interesting insight. One of the things about CyberWorx that I like to point to is the fact that though we are a mixed civilian and active duty force, and I do a lot of translation for them of the military concepts, just because I've existed in that space for 16 years now. So the design within a context that you're not familiar when you're actually doing, especially in the research phase, is extremely difficult, which is why you opt for more co-creative, you know, or in Kinevin, you have the agents themselves interpret the data for you rather than interpreting it as an outside expert. So that's a really interesting, the translation across domains from the civilian to the military is hugely important. And in design, it's really problematic. You know, there's a lot of efforts right now in what's called decolonizing design, because historically, a lot of design work has consisted of outsiders basically, you know, colonizing a space with their own values or perceptions of what's going on, but without that interpretation or that co-creative factor, or that translation, you end up with as an outcome that would only be ideal if the people you were designing for had the same brains and experience as you did.
Yeah, there's a group called Know Innovation, KNOW Innovation, and I think they do some of the best work that I've ever seen, and they focus specifically on science. However, they have a branch organization now that is just some of their facilitators broke out because of what you just described, and they said, hey, we can do better here. So they now run programs around the world, in particular in sort of in areas that likely haven't had access to design facilitation support in the past. But they describe it as inclusive innovation. And their fundamental premise is that they will not allow the values of the facilitators or these sort of outside sponsored, well-moneyed agencies to shape the thinking that's happening within the design work itself in situ or in those communities. And I think that's a powerful approach, and just addressing it head on and say, we're going to structure these sessions and we're going to structure this work in a way that doesn't allow the sponsors or the facilitators to shape the thinking and the outcomes. That's a powerful commitment.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nate, for bringing us through that. I'm glad we have the artifact now to include in the outputs. So we'll make sure to include JSOW in the catalog and might reach out to you further for further info if we need it. But this has been a wonderful event, and thank you all for staying as late as you did. And yeah, it was good to see you all.